Welcome back to the morning show here on Rise News. According to Nigeria Security Services, known as the Department of State Services, who did acknowledge the receipt of a court order for the release of Mr. Sowore, have insisted that nobody came to claim him.
The DSS statement had sparked off reactions which had generated to protests by human rights activists in Abuja and here in Lagos.
Now, while the Free Sowore protest at the DSS office in Lagos was peaceful, the same cannot be said of the Abuja protest, which turned violent as men of the secret police attacked demonstrators and journalists. And joining us now is Inibe Effiong, a legal practitioner and one of Sowore's legal counsel. But before we get started, let's take reports from Lagos and Abuja on the Free Sowore protest that started yesterday. And we begin in Lagos, where our producer, Ozi Okoli, was on ground to monitor the match.
Standing here on Ikosi Road in K2, where the protests have been going on at the former toll gate of Lagos State on the outskirts when you're about to leave through Ojota. And they've been shouting solidarity songs in favor of Sowore, insisting that the DSS must release Sowore. And their activities in the whole of today have centered around chanting and getting the message across to the Department of State for Security that Sowore must be released by any means necessary. I have with me here Femi Adeyeye, who will bring us to speed from the activities, things that they've been doing, moving from one point to another before this time around. So Femi Adeyeye, please.
Yes, the whole Sowore matter and mandates and all other political prisoners has been an issue of travesty of justice from the beginning. From the charges that were slammed on these people, you would understand that the government has something to hide. If not, why would someone come out and expose corruption, and for that reason you're charging that person for terrorism, for treasonable felony? That's the issue of Agbajalingo. For Sowore, calling for a protest, you're charging him for insulting the president, cyber stalking, you're charging him for money laundering, transferring his own money from one account to another account, you're charging him also for treasonable felony. All of these things are pointing to the fact that this government is becoming more repressive by the day. And run down from how he was arrested down to this time, till the court orders that we've gotten. The court orders, the first one that was gotten from Justice Taiwo was for him to be released, just for him to drop his passports and be produced when trial starts. The second order is that the 50 million naira shorty, 100 million naira and 50 million naira. We went to court, the thing was varied to 50 and 20 million naira respectively for Sowore and mandates.
Okay, so let me just find out from you.
Moving out to Abuja, the capital of Nigeria, where operatives of the Department of State Services, DSS, fired live ammunition at protesters and journalists covering the peaceful protest organized by a group of concerned Nigerians who are calling for the release of detained convener of the Revolution Now movement, Mr. Omoyele Sowore.
The protest which took place at the headquarters of the agency was disrupted when operatives of DSS stormed the place in a Hilux van, shouting, kill them, and brutalized journalists, including a Rise cameraman, Mr. Stanley Ugochukwu. A Rise News correspondent, Chima Nwanko, was there.
The protesters had a simple aim. They want the leader of the Revolution Now movement, Omoyele Sowore, released. But what began as a peaceful protest soon descended into bloodshed. Members of the security service fired live rounds and tear gas in the air, sending people fleeing. One person fainted, a journalist from Galaxy TV was assaulted and his camera seized, while a cameraman from this channel, Arise News, had to plead not to be beaten up and had his camera taken away instead. The leader of the civil rights group, which had organized the protest, says officials tried to pay him off so he would not go ahead with the demonstration.
The goal of this is to the people that gave the money, they know themselves and they know the circumstances in which they put us before they gave us the money.
Exactly.
You understand? So the people that gave the money, they know themselves, you understand? And we that they gave the money, we also know those who gave the money.
Exactly.
We are saying now that we know our lives may be at risk, you understand? And that for the greatest good for all Nigerians, and especially for Omoyele Sowore and Bakare, that we will have chosen not to say some things now.
So there you have it, the protests in Lagos and in Abuja. Clear contrast. While the Lagos one was peaceful, Abuja turned violent. But joining us now is Inibe F. Young, a legal practitioner and one of Showore's legal counsel. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I've asked you before you were part of any of this protest yesterday, you said no. The DSS has refused to release Showore. Do you think that this protest is enough to compel an agency such as the DSS that is refusing to obey court orders? What's your thought on this protest?
The protest ordinarily would not have been necessary at the SSS. I usually prefer to call them by the name by which it is established under the law. Because the name DSS, or Department of State Service, is itself an act of lawlessness. The name that the law knows and recognizes is State Security Service. And this name DSS came about when Marilyn Oga was the spokesperson of the agency. But that is beside the point. The continued detention of Mr. Showore and Bakare is a clear reflection that the government of the day is determined, unmistakably, to conquer the Nigerian people.
Those are very strong words. What do you mean by that?
That is what it is. There is no other way to describe the travesty, the gross impunity, the reckless lawlessness that is going on. Note that Mr. Showore was arrested, purportedly for planning to stage a revolution, for purportedly planning to overthrow a democratically elected government, in quote. He was detained without a court order. We challenged them, they ran to court and sought an order to detain him for 45 days, for 90 days originally. You know the law under which that application was brought? The application was brought under the Terrorism Prevention Act. The court, in its wisdom, allowed them to detain Showore for 45 days. Under the Terrorism Prevention Act, we filed an application seeking to discharge the ex parte order, the basis upon which Showore was detained. For reasons I may not be able to comment very specifically on air, that application was never taken. But you know, interestingly, when the order elapsed, Justice Taiwo Taiwo ordered the State Security Service to release Mr. Showore. That first order was flouted, even when the 45 days period granted by the court had elapsed. Initially, he was arrested without an order of court and detained for some days. He was illegally detained based on an illegal order because, as far as we are concerned, the 45 days order for his detention was obtained illegally. And when the order expired, the same judge who granted that order ordered his release. They refused to release him. They went to court to file charges. None of the charges relates to terrorism. And this is an important point that the media should help us to stress, that Mr. Showore was arrested pursuant to the Terrorism Prevention Act. But no charge of terrorism has been brought against Showore, meaning that the totality of his arrest and detention ab initio was unlawful. Now, you claim that this person has committed an offense. You have submitted yourself to the judicial process by filing charges for whatever the charges are worth against Showore and Mr. Bakare. The same court, Justice Ijeoma Ojukwu, granted them bail on very stringent terms, unparalleled in a recent legal history. To the point that the learned judge said Showore should not leave Abuja, Bakare should not leave Osogbo, not even Osun State. is unparalleled. Sowore was able to satisfy all the requirements.
After he had gone back to court, you know.
To ask for variation.
To ask for variation.
Now, on the 6th of November, the same judge who granted the bail, the same judge who varied the bail conditions, signed a release order directing the DSS to release Mr. Sowore and Mr. Bakare. I accompanied the bailiff of the court to the SSS or DSS headquarters. They said, no, we have closed. We cannot receive process by this time. What an embarrassment. Note, Sowore was abducted. And I use the word abducted deliberately because it wasn't an arrest. Abducted from his residence in Lagos at about 2 a.m. Now, the same agency claimed they cannot collect or receive court process at about 4:30 p.m.
What time does that agency normally close?
An agency cannot close. A security agency cannot close.
So you are, because another
It's
point,
like saying that a hospital has closed. It is an essential
another point
service.
you're making is that nobody has come to collect Sowore. But I'm glad that you are the man here sitting in front of me that went there to say, okay, these are the terms, bring Sowore to me. And they said, no, we have closed for the day. Because that's one of their strong points. They said, nobody has come to collect Sowore. The Jihadi too went with all the protesters and said, okay, we are here to collect Sowore. But they say, no, nobody. It's not a working day. We'll take your thoughts after this quick commercial break. All right, still a morning show here on the Rise News. We've got Inebe F. Young, legal practitioner, one of Sowore's legal counsel, and we're talking about the fact that the DSS keeps claiming that nobody has come to collect Sowore.
Sowore commodity.
So nobody has come to collect him. I mean,
Is
that's
he a
the
parcel?
claim. But it looks as though, from the body language, that the DSS isn't ready to release him. For what reasons are this?
They will have to release it. We are not going to just sit back and allow this reign of impunity to continue. I confirm to you that I was at the SSS headquarters on the 6th and on the 7th of November, personally. On the 7th, after they were served, we spoke with their lawyers. I also met with Mr. Sowore personally and Mr. Bakare. It was obvious to me at that point that they were not sincere. They were not committed to the rule of law. A lot is going on, behind the scenes, on our part. Some of the details I may not be able to disclose. The one thing I want Nigerians to understand is that this is not about Sowore. We cannot have a country.
What is it about?
I think there's a sinister political agenda. The government is using Sowore to register something on the mind of Nigerians, about what is to come. So that
What is this
whoever
about?
wants, I don't know what it is, but the signs are clear.
What are the signs?
You can't have this reign of impunity. You cannot have journalists being assaulted for carrying out their constitutional responsibilities. You cannot have a National Assembly that has not been able to pass the Whistleblower Act Protection Bill, suddenly introducing a bill to regulate social media, suddenly prescribing or recommending death penalty for hate speech. All these things are clearly calculated and planned towards a political agenda that will unfold in the time to come. But on Sowore's case, I am really troubled. Not because Sowore is suffering, but because I don't know whether Nigeria will survive this administration. Look.
Those are very hard statements.
But we have to say the way it is.
Statements.
We have to say these things the way it is. The State Security Service, under the National Security Agencies Act, is directly under the command of the president, not any minister. President Buhari has direct control over the SSS. So nobody can tell me, nobody can convince me that this cycle of reckless impunity can continue without the imprimatur of the president. I beg to differ.
But the president is not in the country.
The president is aware.
I'd like to come in here. Like you've rightfully, spoken about this. Within 1 week, we're seeing 2 bills being passed to regulate hate speech, with the most recent being the National Commission for Prohibition of Hate Speech. Now, how do you reckon that this is connected back to the Showery case?
No, it is connected.
Secondly, I also want to know about Showery's, state of mind and state of being. We are aware that he said that he was going to go on a hunger strike. He stopped coming down to collect food. I'm a bit concerned about his health and his safety, because he's the figure point for all of this that is going on. If anything happens to him, then this in itself will escalate.
Note that the APC government came to power in 2015 on a mantra of change. The apostles of this change, to many Nigerians, are the greatest, the most vicious propagators of fake news and hate speech. These are people who said unprintable things.
What are your facts? Lay them.
These are people who make reckless statements. Governor Rufai was one of them. Adam Toshimuli said a lot of things. Like Mohammed, I don't even want to talk about him. And today, suddenly, at a time that the country is the poverty capital of the world, at a time that this administration has not been able to address the issue of unemployment, at a time that fiscal and monetary policies are neither here nor there, at a time that the country is basically ungoverned because you have a transparent president today. Is it not shameful that in 2019, in the 21st century, while the world is going to space, you have a president of the most popular black nation disappearing from the country to a destination that the government cannot even disclose to Nigerians.
No, but they said it's
and they're
in
telling
London.
us he can rule from anywhere.
No, but they said he's in London. He's in London and he's going
Where
to
in London?
Nigerian house.
What is he doing in London?
Justin Welby.
What is he doing in London?
The private
Is
visit.
the British Prime Minister in Nigeria?
No, but the British Prime Minister too go elsewhere. I mean,
Is he in Nigeria?
The day the Brexit vote was taken, Boris Johnson was away in America.
On official responsibility.
On official responsibility, but he can take private holidays too. There are times that the British Prime Minister
Agreed.
is on holiday
I agree.
and something happens and he comes back. So maybe the president is taking a holiday.
For you to do that, Section 145 of the Constitution says you must. It says whenever. It doesn't say 21 days after.
So let's
It says any moment the president leaves Nigeria, he must transmit
talk
a letter
about that.
to the National Assembly.
So now we don't take the conversation away from what it is. Let's go back to Showery. Do you think that the DSS is planning to keep him till trial begins? Because we do know trial is next month. And how will that impact the trial set for December 5?
Look, a lot of aberration has taken place in this trial. On the last day we were in court, we got to court. I was there personally. We saw equipment being brought to court. Behind our back, they claimed they were going to shield and mask witnesses without a formal application to the court. And they had already concluded the arrangement to have a secret trial behind our back. So when they say, oh, that we have a case in court, we are ready to confront them. We are not afraid of the case in court. But what we are saying is that you cannot try them outside the law. If the court has ordered their release upon the perfection of their bail conditions, on what basis are you detaining them? What they are telling us is that Nigeria is a banana republic. You cannot have this in a sane country.
Have you gone back to court, to seek redress to say the DSS has refused to grant these bail conditions? And like I said, what implication is this refusal to release Showery having on that trial?
We're initiating contempt proceedings against the Director General of the SSS for him to come and show cause why he should not be committed to prison or to correctional service, as it is called now. We're insisting that the DG of the SSS should be sent to prison until he complies with the order of the court. Nobody is above the law. So let us stop this pretense that whether they can do this and get away with it. We have to insist that there has to be consequence for impunity. That is the only way we can salvage this country.
Let's talk about the CJN in all of this, because he's the purveyor of the judiciary in this country.
The chief
Is there nothing, is there no complaint to the CJN? Is there nothing, at any point is going to be brought into all of this?
The Attorney General of the Federation, the Minister of Justice?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mentioned that we are taking several steps. We are exploring a lot of options. And in the next 24 to 48 hours, you will hear about some of these things. And these high-placed officials you've mentioned, you will hear from us. I don't want to be very specific, but I can confirm to you that in the next 24 to 48 hours, you will hear several options.
When was the last time you actually laid your eyes on Mr. Sowore?
That was on the 7th of November, last Thursday. I met with him. The SSS facility is not a place for human beings to be kept without justification. Before Sowore was arraigned in court, he hadn't seen the sun for one day. Sowore is being kept in solitary confinement. No access to telephone, no TV, no newspaper. He can even barely exercise. And you recall when he was in court, he said on record, and the DSS have not denied it, that Boko Haram members who are being kept in DSS custody have access to telephones, have access to TV, and have privileges that Sowore does not have. And I would have dismissed it if not that when I was in court on the last day, I saw some of them being brought to court by DSS, and they were just walking very freely. Boko Haram suspects. Note that the Buhari's administration has so far freed several Boko Haram captives. So a government that is giving amnesty to people that are killing Nigerians is the same government that is detaining people for protesting.
Mr. Niebe, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We're definitely keeping an eye on this story as it's developing and the protest that follows. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Well, that brings us to the end of the show today. I am Adesoa Omorwan.
I'm Rufai Hosseini.
And I'm Sheito Atigari. Thank you for watching from our entire team here in Lagos. Enjoy the rest of your morning and, of course, the rest of your day. Goodbye.